Hello, and welcome to Booked Solid, New Canaan Library's podcast for adventurous readers across all genres. I'm your host, Kathleen, a collections librarian.
I'm your host, James, an adult services librarian.
And I'm your host, Kat, a children's librarian.
And today we're talking about The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin.
So, before we get started, here's a quick introduction to the book in case people haven't read it yet. The Stillness is a world in which natural disasters are so common that multiple civilizations have been destroyed by them. Their scattered ruins and weird artifacts are a reminder of the destruction that Father Earth can wreak upon the unprepared. Modern society is arranged around surviving natural disaster, but for Esun, a mother in a small community, when the world ends, it ends twice in one day. Far to the north, a man uses geological powers called orogeny to deliver a near-fatal blow to an empire and practically splits the continent in two. As this happens, Esun's young son, Uche, uses that same power instinctively to defend their home from the aftershocks of the event and is killed by Esun's husband, Jija, when he realizes that his son is a wielder of this hated ability. As the world begins to end around her, Esun, secretly a wielder of orogeny herself, swears bloody vengeance against her husband and sets off in pursuit of him, hoping to rescue her daughter, who Jija has taken with him as he flees. But Esun's vengeance is not the only story we follow in this book. We also see the stories of Demaya, a young orogene, being taken from her home to learn how to properly use her powers, namely to be forced to live and die at the pleasure of the oppressive state. We also follow Cyanite, a powerful orogene who is working for the state, setting off on a mission with a true master of the craft, but unbeknownst to her, the mission is going to open her eyes to the truth about what her world has been built on.
As always, we will be spoiling the fifth season. This is a book with a couple major twists. I still think it's worth reading regardless of whether or not you've been spoiled, but if you don't want to be spoiled, stop now and come back after you finished.
So, what did we all think of this one? This is, again, the first book in a fantasy trilogy, so it does end in kind of a cliffhanger, but it's a pretty complete story in and of itself. What do we think?
This was my third time reading it. So I read it after it first came out, and then I read it again when the third book in the trilogy came out, and I think what really struck me most on this read was just how fresh it still feels. There's really not much in the high fantasy subgenre that's being written in this way. That's what hit me this read. What about you, James?
Sure. So this read actually, I've read this maybe twice. This is probably my second time reading this. What really hit me this time was the fact that a lot of this book, things that I associate with this book, are actually in the subsequent books in the series. So I was pleasantly surprised by what I was reading because I didn't remember a lot of it. I kind of had plastered it over in my mind, but I really was struck with the way in which this is very much unlike anything else that I've read recently in this kind of genre. It's very much a different kind of focus and a different kind of presentation of the story than I've seen in many other books.
I know I've said this many times. I'm not a big fantasy reader, and so to approach this book, which I think has a lot of like sci-fi fantasy elements, I think it was certainly a bigger undertaking for me, not being familiar with this level of world building and a lot of words you have to get used to. One of the things, though, that I really like about it is that after I was reading it for a while, I started to realize that things like orogeny or something felt like real words. I was almost tempted to be like, oh, I'd like to look it up in the dictionary sort of thing. So everything feels very seamless, I think, in the way that it's described, probably because Jemisin did a lot of real world research into
Plate
geology
tectonics,
and
things like that.
Yeah, so it's actually rooted in so much science, which is really cool. I had this book on my radar, actually. I know that you guys are not going to believe that I did want to read this book, and I just hadn't read it yet. But because it had won 3 consecutive Hugo Awards, right? So every book in the series had actually won for Best Novel.
Yes.
And so
unprecedented.
Yeah, so like this prestigious award in sci-fi fantasy, and I was really curious about what kind of series is so amazing that every single book is an award-winning book. And I think reading this, I definitely found out what makes it so special, what makes it so interesting, and I really enjoyed it.
To talk about like the kind of great writing that N.K. Jemisin does, like when you open the book, like the first thing that you really see is this quote, which is, "This is what you must remember. The ending of one story is just the beginning of another. This has happened before, after all. People die, old orders pass, new societies are born. When we say the world has ended, it's usually a lie, because the planet is just fine. But this is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, for the last time."
It just hits every time, that line.
unnumbered page that's just right there. You open it up and you're like, huh, what's this going to be about?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to start our discussion, we could, I guess, start with the world that the book takes place in, because I think that the world of the stillness is a really interesting one, because it's a world in which the geological aspects are interesting, as are the kind of societal aspects as well. They're very unique in a way. The continent that this takes place on, it's like the world is a supercontinent, basically. It's like a Pangea kind of thing, which is littered with the kind of remnants and remains of previous civilizations that have fallen to these kinds of very, very frequent natural disasters that occurred. So the entire planet is highly geologically active. So there's many more supervolcanoes and things like that that just wipe out civilizations.
I was thinking about what Kathleen said about the words that are made up in this book feeling like real words. And N.K. Jemisin is a very practiced writer. This was not her debut book. And you can tell that she has worked on the craft of introducing world-building concepts in a way that feels like less work for the reader. I mean, it certainly isn't spoon-feeding you. You don't have someone necessarily arriving to a new place. So I guess you get that with Demaya's perspective.
You do get that with Demaya's perspective, but the book doesn't start the reader there. The book drops the reader in kind of the deep end of, well...
The book drops the reader in the end of the world, which is a shock for me, which I think is really interesting to just see, everything is bad immediately.
Yeah. Everything is bad immediately, and also it still feels, I would say, more realistic in some ways in terms of how communities respond to crisis than some of the very grim, dark, post-apocalyptic fantasy that's out there. We know that in times of crisis, people can behave in really extraordinarily altruistic and pro-social ways. We have a lot of evidence that backs this up. And people can also behave in ways that are very villainous and very cruel to others. And I think Jemisin manages to have both present in a way that feels very emblematic of humanity when it comes to the commune that Essun later finds herself in.
Yes, I think the communes kind of are an interesting part of this world too, like a really unique facet that Jemisin, when she was building this story, she was very interested in the idea of what would a society look like that's built around surviving these disasters. And her kind of response to that is to create a series of communities that when a big disaster like this happens, these societies are literally built to be able to jettison elements of their normal day life without kind of thinking twice about it. Commerce immediately stops the second this stuff happens. If you're rich, you're not rich anymore. All of your stuff is immediately belonging to the town. People's roles become super specialized at that point, as they're all of the production, everything is dedicated to surviving the current crisis and threat. And it's not just an immediate descent into just kind of people fighting each other for resources, because their communities are literally designed around these elements. And in interviews that she's given too, she's talked about how it's not kind of what you'd imagine, where it's it's the end of the world, it's time to get the disabled people and throw them out or whatever. It's no, she says that these communities are built to they're going to take those people in and keep caring for them in different ways. It's not just the end of the world, everyone is going to fight each other. It's we're surviving this together.
Absolutely. I think as well, the use of the word runny bag is very close to sort of things that, the EPA is going to recommend that everybody has in their homes. You can't read this book without thinking about climate disaster. How do we make our communities more climate resilient? Because we're not set up in this way currently. So that's something I was thinking about as well.
I love how in the books you can see that there's societal ideas around where you live. It's you can judge the people living there in a certain way. I know that Sienna is really shocked when she realizes that there's this really big community that's right on the shore. She's no, all of these seaside communities are at such risk from tsunamis and all this kind of activity. Why would they live there? Which is, in our world, as climate change is causing rising sea levels, there are places where people, it's hard for them to live there because the water is literally coming up to their doors now. Their homes are being swamped, and that's kind of what the book is gesturing towards, I think.
As well, I think on this thread of environmental themes in the book, towards the end, there was a recounting of the Father Earth story where, Father Earth took care of humanity until they took the marrow of the bones of Father Earth and killed his only child. And when you hear they dug into the earth and took the marrow from the bones, the easiest allegorical reading of that is fracking and drilling for oil. And it made me wonder if other people also could read it as the stillness is our world, right? It's the world, the earth we have, just sometime far in the future.
Yes.
I think it definitely has that feeling. I mean, that was a question that I was turning over as I was reading it, and I don't know if this is ever more explicit in future books or if this is something that is intentional or just it's an idea that never really gets answered. But I mean, I think the idea that, and when you're talking about this Pangea-like continent, supercontinent sort of thing, I mean, it has in the past been separate and then together and then will be separate again. I think that's a description in there. So I think there's this idea that it's just, if not explicitly our Earth, something so similar and something that, yeah, I mean, I would draw those parallels and think, oh, this could be how things look in the far future. And certainly we are going to have to adapt to all of our environmental crises now, and this does feel like a possibility.
You know, I'm just realizing now part of the reason coastal cities are so dangerous in the stillness is, big spoiler here, there's no moon anymore.
That's true. The moon is missing.
To guide the tide. So, like, what does an ocean look like in the stillness without a moon to guide the tides?
Yep.
You know?
And every time there's an earthquake, and there's a lot of earthquakes.
There's a lot of earthquakes.
Lots of tsunamis.
Lots of tsunamis.
There's even more shock when they discover, like, an island community, because they think that they're literally, these people living here are insane. It's like, they're dead. And,
you know, you have to wonder as well about the island community specifically. One of the other things I noticed is the ways in which the Sanzed Empire rewrites and retells history in order to control people. So they say islands are dangerous, and the people who live on that island are like, well, there's been these tunnels here forever. Like, if we die when a season happens, we die, but, like, there are livable places here. And you have to wonder if part of the reason the Sanzed Empire wants to communicate that living on an island is impossible is because, for the most part, islands are out of their reach.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, another example of ways they twisted the story is the story of Michelin, obviously, which we find out about later in the book.
Yeah. So in Demaya's story, when she's learning about orogeny from Shafa, who is this guardian who's kind of been assigned to take her to the fulcrum, like the school for origin, he tells her the story of Michelin, which is basically when a powerful origin goes to confront the Empire about the way maybe that they're being treated or something. It's unclear exactly what the complaint is with the Empire. And the framing that Shafa kind of takes is that this person is the ultimate evil. This is the justification for why origins have to be so heavily controlled and monitored and basically dehumanized to be tools of the state and nothing more. And then in reality, you can easily see that's probably not what happened in a lot of ways. That might not be exactly what happened there.
I think one of the things that hurts most reading that scene is Demaya is fully dependent on Shafa. She is trusting Shafa to take her to a safe place after her parents have given her away because they're afraid of her orogeny. And she realizes at the end of the story, she was identifying with the hero, the Emperor's bodyguard who killed Michelin. But Shafa was telling her, no. You could be the villain that everyone hates, and I will kill you if you change in that way. Mm-hmm. Hurts every time you read it. And then he breaks her hand to show her that he can kill her at a moment's notice.
Yeah, he's definitely another member of the really awful parental figure-ish cast of characters. He's up there.
Shafa is sort of a member of a class in the Sanzed Empire known as the Guardians, who are in charge of controlling and eliminating origins just more broadly to keep them fulfilling the wishes of the Sanzed Empire.
It's an interesting, this is one of the other interesting elements of the book that I find, whereas in most kind of fantasy books, you have the people who have the magic equivalent or magic powers to be in charge. You've got the sorcerer kings or whatnot. And in this case, it's very much not that. It's the people who don't have the magic who are in charge. And the way in which they remain in charge is just kind of a dual campaign of just the most brutal and dehumanizing propaganda against these people, combined with the origins, with also a very real immediate threat of death and horrible violence against their personhood if they do not toe the line completely.
Yeah, and it's worth noting in the three perspectives we have, which of course the big twist is that it's all the same person, just under three different names. They're all origins who are coming to this system and experiencing it in a variety of different ways. It's also worth noting Jemisin has been pretty upfront about the fact that she wrote this book during some of the Ferguson protests back in 2015. And it was written kind of in response, she's a Black American, to racialized violence that exists within the US as well. It's not fully allegorical, I would say. I don't think that's quite right. But it is influenced by that real history.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see, because we do have these three different perspectives, and we may not initially know that they are the same person, but we do know that they share similar traits, being origins being one of the main ones. And I think it's really interesting because of those three stages that you were talking about, that you can kind of see different levels of understanding or coming into power or realizing the ways that they've been victimized by this society. So I think for someone like Demaya, I mean, initially the fulcrum is going to be exciting in that she's away from her family, that's locked her away, that won't let her, I mean, she isn't using her abilities. She doesn't know how to harness them. This place will teach her how to harness them. And
in a different book, she's the kid going to wizard school.
Yeah. And I mean, but the strange thing, of course, about the fulcrum is that it's just the worst stuff you've ever read. As you're hearing about her experiences there, just terrible things happen.
And it's still better than the alternative, which is basically the Empire has trained the community to just basically kill these people.
Yeah.
If you find these people and the Guardians can get them, just kill them instantly.
So truly hers is the best case scenario,
and
in that she's
awful.
Discovered as a child and taken to harness this. And but then we see her later as Cyanite, which basically her purpose is to breed.
Mm-hmm. And to breed with the most powerful origins, because she's also very powerful. She's also very lucky in that she is pretty powerful, because if she were slightly less powerful, all she'd be doing is breeding. Whereas she's also being mentored to become, potentially being mentored.
And if she was slightly less powerful and slightly had less control of her abilities, she would be literally lobotomized and strapped to a chair somewhere so that she could just kind of instinctively use her power to quell earthquakes, which is how the Empire has been able to survive basically so long, is that they are literally turning people into tools and just putting them in huts. Mm-hmm. And then in the book also you get the sense that sometimes people will further abuse these lobotomized people as a source of amusement if you're wealthy enough. So it's just, you can definitely see the workings of this society. The engine that allows these people to live in this way on this planet is just based so much on undefendable violence against these people who really have no control over anything that is going on.
Exactly. And I think you learn with the characters in these moments.
Yes.
So these are different stages of understanding. And so that moment when Cyanite is with Alabaster and taken to that node station to find the node maintainer, who I mean, I think it's pretty explicit by the end that we know it was his child.
Yes.
And that he has other children out there that have also met terrible fates. And I mean, these are things that she's completely unaware about. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, with the island, that, I don't know if you want to talk about this but what causes her to leave and then start her life a third time, you know, these terrible things happening, each one brings her, I think, closer to the understanding of, well, what really kicks off the book, which is Alabaster destroying the world.
Yeah.
But although I don't think it's necessarily her making the argument for this to happen yet, I think we're getting all of those puzzle pieces in place of why it will make sense.
It's paced so well by the time, which is, you know, in the last few pages of this first book in the trilogy, you learn that Alabaster set off the earthquake that has destroyed the Sansa Empire, killing millions of people in the capital city.
Possibly dooming everybody.
Possibly dooming the entire world and the human race. You're not like, wow, he's such a villain. You're like, I get it.
That's the best. I think that's really the part of the book where everything kind of clicks for me, is that you realize this is really not a book about, this first book is not a book about saving the world. It's about coming to the point of realization where you can understand why someone could legitimately decide to end the world. At what point does it make sense? When does it become like almost the ethical thing to do, because what is supporting it is just so completely undefendable and it will never change in this way? When is this destruction needed to create something more? And Jemisin has talked about this in interviews. She did an interview with Ezra Klein in the New York Times, talking about how she believes that real change does not come without sacrifice, and there's a cost to it, and that it would be untrue and unfair to kind of depict like a magical positive change without any kind of consequences. And then I think this book series really does that well, with taking you along the journey to understand why Alabaster would drive that spike into the Earth's core and pull it out.
And speaking of Alabaster and also about the world ending, the book opens with two world endings, which is that Essen has realized that her husband has killed their toddler after he displays the traits of being an origin and stopped an earthquake.
From destroying their
home. He stopped it from destroying their home, and her husband killed him for that. Instantly. And that brings us to parenthood, which is a big, big theme in this book, both for Essen and for Alabaster, obviously, whose children are locked into these known maintainers. Essen herself, when in the form of Demaya, her parents gave her away to the Fulcrum. Her mother calls her a monster to her face and like locks her in a barn. And so when Essen arrives...
Which might have saved her life because the town was probably going to kill her, but it's like, whoa!
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what does it mean to parent in a world where you know your child will fundamentally be seen as a threat and will be killed, could be killed at a moment's notice?
It's so intense.
Essen is forced to carry Alabaster's child, basically. And we see on the island this brief picture of her as a mother where she's like, I love her as a mother because she's not your typical mom character as written, especially in genre fiction, where she's like fully devoted to her child and this is going to become my new life. Instead, it's Alabaster who has that moment, which I really love to see. It's the only child he's had who is free for his brief life.
Also, with the framework of this book makes, if you don't realize what's going on and that these characters are all the same person, when you get to the point in Cyanite's story where she kills her son to prevent him from falling into the hands of the Guardians and the state, where she thinks she ends her own world in that moment. Yeah. She kills her child. When you think back to Essen at the beginning, coming back and another son has been killed, but this time by her husband. Yeah. It's like it just completely recontextualizes everything for me. It's so much more like I can see why she completely shuts down at that point. She's already done this once before. She's done this, and now she's on the other side of it.
Yeah. And Alabaster, when they meet at the very end of the book again, says, I understand why you killed our son on the island, and I will never forgive you.
Yeah.
And you have to sort of accept that, like, part of the reason he's ending the world is because Essen ended his world. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I say Essen did it. Really, I would say the Sons to Empire did it.
Empire did it.
But from Alabaster's perspective, right, what was the point in living after that point?
Yeah.
After that moment.
On top of everything else,
I am definitely going to go reread the next two books in the series. I've gotten hyped again.
What's great about this book also, I think, is that there's so many mysteries that it kind of introduces. There's points where Demaya, I believe, is interacting with Guardians and like something really strange happens with the Guardian. The Guardian becomes possessed by some weird force. You don't get any answers about what that is in this book.
You know that Guardians have to stay bonded to Origins or they'll slowly lose their mind, but you don't know why.
You don't know why. You don't even... This book also, you spend a relatively small amount of time with Essen. Mm-hmm. And so when she kind of goes on her journey, she doesn't even find her husband or her daughter. She doesn't find them.
No.
It ends with her talking to Alabaster, where Alabaster kind of casually says, hey, the moon's gone. What do you know about the moon?
Have you ever heard of a moon?
I've heard of a moon. The entire time there's no moon. And it's like, oh, that's a mystery. So you don't even know. So that's ahead of you. The secret of whatever this thing's going on with the moon is ahead of you. There's so much left for you to discover. But it feels like such a complete chapter of Essun's life. Yeah. It's great. That's kind of what this first book is.
It feels like a satisfying ending, even though that is, I mean, it's a great ending. It's a great cliffhanger.
God, it's so good.
There's little teasers in the middle that's like, hey, look at the sky. Is there something missing up there?
Yeah, there's a section where it's like, and the people of the stillness never looked at the sky because the earth was so busy. And you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, there's something missing
out there.
There's something
missing out there.
It's
Kathleen,
great.
Are you going to continue?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do want to know, one of the things that is as you've touched upon is so wild is that there are all of these little details, the stone eaters, the obelisks just hanging out in the sky and following around, possibly bonding with particular origins. None of this is really explained in any satisfying way because you know it's going to be in the later books. So they're just little hints, little tidbits of things. Hoa is, I don't know if we've even really talked about him as a character yet. Hoa's a lot of fun. He's a weird little dude who shows up. And I think, Essen is so deep in her grief and her mission that she's like, this kid seems weird, but doesn't really question that he never eats or sleeps. She's just like, you know what, we're traveling together and he seems to pick up on where my daughter is, so I'm just going to be cool about it. But then it turns out later that he's a stone eater and, turns a wild animal to stone.
Some kind of weird fantasy race thing, I guess, is like the easiest way to explain them. Like, there's so little understood that in this book by the people who even living in this book. They're like, these are like the weirdest things ever, and sometimes they show up and we don't know what to do with them. We just kind of ignore them and we try and hope they go away.
The lack of curiosity at some of these things is wild.
The Empire doesn't know how to use them, so like, ignore them.
My favorite little tidbit about the Stone Eaters is that one was collected by the 6th University. And then it references in the next sentence that they had to build a 7th university shortly afterwards because they just killed or destroyed everything. I also love the Stone Eaters because so many fantasy races are boring and bad. And Stone Eaters are so non-human. They fascinate me. I love them.
They're fascinating.
That's why I love a weird little child. I love him. He's not a child. We don't know how old he is.
No. Right. He has an appearance based on what he thinks kind of will be appealing, I think. Yeah. And so it's just like this, he chooses how to appear, but then you have like these other stone eaters, and they could kind of just pull you into the earth at any moment.
If you're in Origin.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
There's like a chaotic element to them. There's a stone eater with alabaster as well, who has saved him or doomed him.
Now that I say this, they feel very much kind of like the Fae, in that you don't really know what they're going to do and you don't know what their motivations are, and they're not exactly eager to tell you.
No.
Right.
No. And in fact, when there's a moment where Hoa meets this other stone eater, and they're both kind of really mad at each other because they're like, don't tell anyone what's going on here.
Right.
Don't tell me what you're doing. Don't tell me what I'm doing. I'm not going to tell them what you're trying to do. I don't like this.
And it's
really
described
weird.
as them both doing threat displays where they both like show their teeth to each other until the humans are like, hey, calm down.
What's happening?
If for no other reason than that, I'm like, I guess I got to read on. I need to know more.
It's really worth it.
It's really, really worth it.
There's a lot of intense things that happen, and it just kind of gets more intense.
Like, this book is brilliant. And then the next two, I feel like, just build onto it until the third one, which made me cry my eyes out. So,
yeah, I did also cry at the end of the third one.
Yeah, dang,
I was crying.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah. So I think I can say that we all like this one.
Oh yeah,
safely, and I think at that point we're pretty much done with our discussion.
So now for read-alikes.
Yeah, I think the first one that I have here is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, who is a returning author to the podcast, the author of Babel. Very big fan of that. The Poppy War is a story about fantasy war crimes, is the kind of best way I can describe it. There is a empire, and they are under attack. And in order to kind of survive, the children, and they're basically children, they're like teens and kids, they start doing the most horrific stuff to try and survive and prevent their home from being destroyed. It's brutal. It's really interested in oppression and resistance to oppression and coming to make these horrible decisions. That's kind of very reminiscent of the things that kind of are happening in the fifth season. Hard to really describe it in any more detail without spoilers. It's well worth a read if you think you can stomach that kind of stuff, but it is definitely not for everybody. It gets pretty intense.
I think a slightly more approachable book, it is a novella, is The Lies of the Ajungo by Moses Oze Utomi. This was Utomi's debut novella, and it's really impressive for a debut. There's a sequel coming out. I think it released last year. It's about a endless sort of desert and an empire that steals water from people, and a boy who's trying to discover what the empire's purpose is. I compare it to the fifth season in that there's a lot of themes around climate and environment. There's a lot of themes about empires controlling a narrative of a place and sort of uncovering the evil that underpins it. I'm really excited for the sequel novella to come out. And I will also say, my last read-alike pick, I was rotating between a few because I think the fifth season is in conversation with a lot of older work. Jemisin has referenced other work in interviews she's given about the series, so I was torn between recommending Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, which is also post-apocalyptic. Definitely one to think about if you're up for the content of that book before you read it. But I think the fifth season's in conversation with it, as well as like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which is another very difficult book. But I ended up going with Beloved by Toni Morrison, since Jemisin has referenced it in interviews. Both Beloved and the scene with cyanide killing Corundum take inspiration from real historical events in American history. Beloved is about a formerly enslaved woman and her daughter being haunted by her eldest daughter, who she killed to keep her from being returned to slavery. It is a very difficult read, both in form and in content, but if you haven't read it and you're passionate about American literature, I highly encourage you to seek it out.
All right, so Kat, what are we reading next time?
I'm so excited. Okay, so for the first time ever in Book Solid, we're reading a middle grade novel, and for the first time this season, we're reading something that's just pretty fun and adventurous. And that book is The Many Assassinations of Samir, the Seller of Dreams by Daniel Nayeri. I was told by Kathleen and James that I had to pick something, quote, fun, and not about, like, sadness and trauma.
It was very important to us in our continued mental well-being.
I'm very excited to bring this one. This is a historical fiction book. It just won a Newbery Honor, which I'm very excited about, and I'm just going to read the description from the publisher. This is the tale of an exciting journey along the Silk Road with a young monk and his newfound guardian Samir, a larger-than-life character who is the so-called Seller of Dreams. The man is a scammer, his biggest skill being the ability to talk his way into getting what he wants. While that talking did save Monkey's life, it has left A lot of people furious with Samir. Furious enough to hire assassins. Monkey decides to try and save Samir from the attempts on his life as a way to pay off his debt. If he can save Samir 6 times, he'll be a free man. But will they survive all that long? This is not a typical middle grade book, which is part of what I love about it. And I'm excited to see what you both think.
I'm very excited to read this.
I read the author's previous novel, which was excellent. He's such a great writer. And I'm really excited just to explore middle grade, because it's really, even more so, I mean, it's published as a middle grade novel, but it's such an all ages novel.
It really is.
Sounds like a ton of fun, and I'm really excited.
All right, everyone. I think that's it for us here at Book Solid. We will see you all next time.